In 1959, 9 experienced hikers entered the Ural Mountains. They were trained, they were prepared, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Yet sometime during the night, they cut their way out of their tent and walked barefoot into freezing darkness. None of them survived. This is not a legend. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 people walked into the mountains. None walked back. In the winter of 1959, deep in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, 9 experienced hikers vanished under circumstances so disturbing that the case was sealed for decades. To this day, no official explanation fully accounts for what happened. This is the true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. The expedition. In January 1959, a group of 9 hikers, all young, athletic, and highly trained, set out on a winter expedition across one of the most dangerous regions in the Ural Mountains. They were not amateurs. They were students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, trained in survival, extreme cold navigation, long-distance winter hiking. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a respected and cautious leader. The goal was simple: complete the route, earn advanced hiking certification, return alive. They never did. The last known camp. On the night of February 1st, 1959, the group set up camp on the slope of a mountain known locally as Kolatsyahol. Its name means Mountain of the Dead. Even local indigenous people avoided the area. The weather was brutal. Temperatures below 30°, heavy winds, 0 visibility. Yet the hikers were prepared, or so it seemed. When they failed to return, the group was expected back by February 12th. When no word came, search efforts began. At first, officials assumed delay, then concern, then fear. Search teams included volunteers, military personnel, aircraft. What they found would shock everyone involved. The tent. The first discovery was the tent, still standing, partially collapsed. But something was terribly wrong. The tent had been cut open from the inside, not unzipped. Cut. The hikers had fled barefoot or in socks into the freezing night, leaving behind boots, heavy coats, food, equipment. Experienced hikers do not do this, not unless something forces them to. The first 2 bodies were found near a tree line, barefoot, lightly dressed, burn marks on their hands. A small fire had been lit, but not enough to survive. They had frozen to death, but their injuries raised questions. A trail of panic. Footprints led away from the tent, not running, walking, calm, as if under control, as if confused or following something unseen. And then it got worse. Over the next weeks, the remaining bodies were found, some with crushed ribs, massive internal injuries, no external wounds. One body was missing a tongue. Another had missing eyes. Radiation was later detected on clothing. The official cause of death: compelling natural force. The case was closed, but nothing was explained. Why did they cut their way out? Why leave the tent? Why were some bodies injured as if hit by a car? Why was radiation present? Why did witnesses report orange lights in the sky that night? Why did the Soviet government seal the files, the autopsies, and the lies? When the first bodies were recovered, Soviet authorities expected a simple conclusion: exposure, hypothermia, a tragic accident. That illusion did not survive the autopsies. The official examinations. Doctors examined the first 5 bodies in late February 1959. The cause of death for all 5 was listed as hypothermia, but the details told a different story. Hands were damaged, knuckles broken, skin torn, signs consistent with violent struggle, not with the cold. The injuries that made no sense. When the remaining 4 bodies were found in May, buried beneath meters of snow, the case changed forever. Their injuries were catastrophic: massive chest trauma, crushed ribs, skull fractures. Doctors described the force as comparable to a car collision. Yet there were no external wounds, no cuts, no bruises, just internal destruction. The missing tongue. One of the hikers, Lyudmila Dubinina, was found without her tongue. Her eyes were also missing. Authorities claimed animals were responsible, but her mouth showed no bite marks, and her tongue was removed cleanly. That explanation did not satisfy the medical examiner. Radiation on clothing. Several pieces of clothing tested abnormally radioactive, not trace amounts. Detectable. Significant. The Soviet Union did not explain why. Instead, the information was buried. The witnesses in the sky. Local residents and search volunteers later testified to seeing orange spheres of light in the sky the night the hikers fled their tent. Military documents later confirmed rocket tests in the region. But here's the problem. No test flight officially occurred that night, and none explained the injuries. The mountain that locals avoided. The indigenous Mansi people refused to approach the site. They had warned authorities. This mountain is not safe. They spoke of powerful forces, sudden winds, unnatural sounds. The Soviets dismissed it as superstition, but they still sealed the area. The case was closed. Too quickly. On May 28, 1959, the investigation ended. The final conclusion: the hikers died due to a compelling natural force they were unable to overcome. No force was named, no explanation given. The files were classified. Families were warned not to ask questions. The evidence that disappeared. Key photographs vanished. Witness statements were altered. Diaries were partially released. Pages missing. One investigator later admitted, "We were told what the conclusion would be before the investigation ended." The silence that followed. For decades, no one spoke publicly. Journalists were blocked. Researchers denied access. The Soviet Union treated the incident not as a tragedy, but as a liability. The theories they refused to write down. When the official investigation ended, it did not end because answers were found. It ended because every explanation led somewhere dangerous. Theory 1. An avalanche. For decades, authorities quietly pushed one idea: an avalanche. At first glance, it sounded reasonable, but the evidence disagreed. The tent was not buried. The slope angle was too shallow. Footprints were clearly visible days later. No avalanche debris was found. Experienced rescuers rejected the theory immediately. One search leader later said, "If this was an avalanche, it was the most polite avalanche in history." The theory was abandoned. Theory 2. The Mansi people. Another early suspicion fell on the local Mansi tribe. But there was no evidence of violence, no foreign footprints, no motive. The Mansi cooperated fully and helped in the search. They were cleared completely. Yet rumors persisted because someone needed to be blamed. Theory 3. Military testing. This theory terrified investigators. The Soviet Union conducted classified weapons tests in the region. Possible explanations discussed privately: experimental rockets, parachute mines, shockwave weapons. Such weapons could explain internal injuries without external wounds, panic without visible attackers, orange lights in the sky. But admitting this would mean admitting the military killed civilians. So the theory was never written into the final report. Theory 4. Infrasound. Some scientists suggested a rare phenomenon. Strong winds interacting with the mountain could produce infrasound. Low-frequency sound waves can cause extreme anxiety, disorientation, panic. This could explain why experienced hikers fled their tent calmly but irrationally. But infrasound could not explain. Radiation, severe physical injuries, missing organs. The theory was shelved. Theory 5, something else. There was a final theory. It was never written, never named. Investigators only referred to it indirectly. In notes recovered decades later, one sentence appeared. "We are not dealing with ordinary forces." That sentence was crossed out. Why the case was sealed. The Dyatlov Pass incident occurred at the worst possible time. Cold War tensions, military secrecy, public fear. Admitting uncertainty was unacceptable, so the state chose silence. Better no answer than the wrong one. The families were not fooled. Relatives of the victims never accepted the conclusion. They noticed contradictions in reports, missing photographs, different dates on documents. They asked questions. They were ignored. Some were warned to stop. Why the files stayed hidden. For decades, access to the case files was restricted. Researchers who tried to publish findings were blocked. Foreign investigators were denied visas. The Soviet Union collapsed, but the silence remained. The reopening, 60 years later. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case, not to find the truth, but to confirm one explanation. They revisited only natural causes, no new witnesses, no new forensic methods. The conclusion, avalanche, again. But the questions remained. An avalanche does not remove tongues. An avalanche does not cause radiation. An avalanche does not explain glowing lights in the sky. And an avalanche does not scare trained hikers into fleeing barefoot. What emerged after the silence broke? When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many believed the truth would finally surface. Files would open. Witnesses would speak. Secrets would end. That did not happen. What emerged instead was something more disturbing. The files that were never complete. Researchers who gained access to the Dyatlov Pass case files noticed something immediately. The archive was incomplete. Missing photographs. Gaps in timelines. Reports that reference documents no longer present. Some pages were clearly removed. Others were replaced with summaries. The original evidence was gone. The investigator who spoke too late. One of the original investigators, Lev Ivanov, gave a rare interview years later. He admitted that he was under pressure. He said, "We were ordered to close the case. We were not allowed to say what we suspected." When asked what he believed happened, he paused for a long time, then said, something the state could not explain and could not admit. Shortly after the interview, Ivanov died. The photographs that shouldn't exist. In the 1990s, private collectors revealed copies of photographs taken during the search. Some were never included in the official report. They showed bright streaks in the sky, unusual light sources above the mountains, searchers shielding their eyes. Officials claimed they were camera defects. Photographers disagreed. The radiation question returns. Independent experts re-examined clothing samples that still existed. Radiation levels were confirmed. Not enough to kill, enough to notice. Which raised a chilling question. Why was radioactive material present on hikers in a remote mountain range? There was no industry nearby. No known contamination source. Only military activity. The testimony of the locals. After censorship weakened, local residents began to speak. Several claimed they saw glowing spheres moving silently across the sky that night. One witness said, "They were not stars. They were too low. And they moved together." Another said the lights disappeared suddenly, as if turned off. The mountain's reputation. Long before 1959, the mountain had a reputation. The Mansi people avoided it, not because it was dangerous, but because it was wrong. They believed the area was a place where powerful forces met, where humans were not welcome. The Soviets ignored this, but they still renamed the area after Dyatlov, as if to overwrite the past. Why the military theory won't go away. Many modern investigators believe the hikers were caught in the aftermath of a classified military test. Possibilities include parachute mines creating shock waves, experimental rockets causing pressure damage, aerial explosions generating panic. Such tests could explain internal injuries, panic without attackers, lights in the sky, radioactivity. But there is a problem. The military denies all records, and the records are gone. The official reopening. A controlled outcome. When authorities reopened the case in 2019, they focused only on one theory: avalanche. They did not interview surviving witnesses again, test new hypotheses, re-examine missing evidence. It was not an investigation. It was a confirmation. Why the truth may never be written. Some researchers believe the real reason the case remains unresolved is simple. The truth does not fit any safe category. Not natural disaster, not crime, not accident. Admitting that would mean admitting loss of control. And states do not do that. The answer that refuses to exist. Some mysteries remain unsolved because evidence is missing. Others remain unsolved because every answer is wrong. Dyatlov Pass belongs to the second kind. Why no single theory works. Over 60 years later, dozens of explanations exist. Avalanche, military testing, infrasound, unknown weapons, something non-human. Each theory explains part of what happened. None explain everything. That is the core of the horror, the pattern that cannot be ignored. When all evidence is placed side by side, a disturbing pattern emerges. Trained hikers acted irrationally. They fled without panic, but without reason. Some were injured by immense force. Others showed signs of fear before death. The environment itself seemed hostile. This suggests not a single event, but a chain reaction, a likely scenario. Without certainty, the most realistic explanation may be a combination of forces. Something happened near the tent. Something sudden, something terrifying. Possibly a shock wave from an aerial explosion. A loud, unnatural sound. A pressure event. Enough to drive them out. Once outside, confusion and cold finished what fear began. But even this leaves questions unanswered. The details that still defy logic. No theory explains. The missing tongue. The radiation. The glowing lights. The internal injuries without external trauma. These details refuse to align. They remain separate. Why the case still matters. Dyatlov Pass is not just about how 9 people died. It is about how systems react when something happens that does not fit. Instead of admitting uncertainty, the state chose silence. Because uncertainty is dangerous. The family's last truth. Relatives of the hikers eventually accepted something painful. They may never know the full truth, but they know this. Their loved ones did not make mistakes. They were not reckless. They were not foolish. Something happened to them. The mountain remains. Today, Dyatlov Pass still exists. Hikers still visit. The wind still howls. And at night, the area feels wrong. Some visitors report strange sounds. Others feel sudden dread. Most leave early. No one stays long. Why? This story endures. Dyatlov Pass terrifies us because it shows a truth we avoid. Sometimes reality does not owe us explanations. Sometimes people do everything right and still disappear into silence. The final thought: if the hikers had survived, their story would have been unbelievable. If they had explained what frightened them, would anyone have believed them? Or would their truth have been buried? Like the evidence was, 9 people went into the mountains. None came back, and the truth went with them.